until beneath us lay the land of the children of Kim? He's not saying I'm a child of Kim. He's saying we rolled up on Kim. Raging they came with cudgels and spears. So the indigenous people of Kim saw Thoth in them, the so-called Egyptian Atlantean, you know what I mean? Oh, he gave us writing and shit. Oh, he gave us magic science. Well, how did he put the magic science on you? Why are you craving magic sciences today? I'm not talking about Enoch science. I'm not talking about the essence of really, comprehending the vibration. I'm talking about his version, his twist, his order on his magic science. See, these angels taught their own order to it. So it wasn't that this science is evil. It's the order it's being presented in. If they have you out of order, they can still put the same ingredients, but put them out of order and get a different organism, a different vibration. So it wasn't like the creator's trying to keep these things away from his children, but you don't give your children a gun to play with. You don't give your children acid and say, hey, here's a can of acid. Or more realistically, you don't give a 5-year-old, whiskey. You don't give a 5-year-old whiskey. I know they used to put some in the, on the top of the little bottle to make you go to sleep. I get, you feel me, man. Don't act like you don't. So we got to choose up. If you won't give a 5-year-old whiskey, then is it the fire water, or is it how it's being ordered and how it's being presented? Is it the this, or is it the order? Is it the abuse? Are you getting all the drop of it? Alright, so raging, they came with us, they came with cudgels and spears. So you came at him with weapons of war, lifted in anger, seeking to slay and utterly destroy the sons of Atlantis. Then I raised my staff and I directed a ray of vibration. So with this staff of Thoth, he directed a ray of vibration. Just meditate on that. A ray of vibration is coming from his staff at the end. Accomplish thy desire, but thou didst not give him anything, but thou didst further exact of him the destroying of idols. So we got here
power for a number of reasons.
I know it's corny, but you're going to see how real it is. You're going to see how real it is to these temples, how real it is to these paradigms. Let go.
Our stories of the past have been changed, altered, mistranslated, and completely been misunderstood as we rounded the curve on the precession of the equinox. Modern views of our history account for many things, but completely dismiss many very important pieces in the puzzle. For example, the pyramids of Giza. There is no modern theory that accounts for how these could have been made. Individually, each block cannot be pulled even with 50 men pulling it, let alone drag it for hundreds of miles and then stack them on top of each other 450 feet in the air, in such a precise way that even modern technology can't achieve. Not to mention having it lined up precisely with both Orion's belt, a golden mean and Fibonacci spiral, and be a primary nodal point of every sacred site on the planet. And that's just one example. Our history is not what we think. Many things that we've been led to believe to be true simply is not. This has got to be the biggest. The field of archaeology recently saw some monumental discoveries that are rocking the foundation of what we think we know about ourselves. Many ancient cities such as Babylon, Erech, and Akkad that were written about in the Bible and other ancient texts were always thought to be myths because no one could prove they existed. Then, one of them was found. This led to finding another, and then another. Inside one of these cities, Archaeologists found thousands of cylindrical clay tablets hidden deep within the earth under this ancient city. The tablets were completely covered in text, written in cuneiform, and tell an ancient story that spans back over hundreds of thousands of years on this planet, describing the history of the Earth and the origins of the human race in great detail. Now, the first thing we all want to do is just say that they were making things up. They didn't know the history of Earth, and they were simply creating tales to explain where they came from. However, if this was true, how can we explain how they knew so many things about the universe that would seem impossible to know? Not only did the Dogons know all about the distant planets in the solar system, but so did the Sumerians. They described them all in great detail in these Sumerian records. They also knew about the precession of the equinox. That's a tough one for a historian to understand, because it takes over 2,000 years of continuous observation to actually learn that the Earth has a wobble. The Sumerians had this information from day one of their civilization. A man named Zacharias Sitchin spent a long time transcribing these texts and had put them all together in his books, but many others have also done the same, and the interpretations are always very similar. Not only that, but Thoth has also shared information about this with us, and his account matches the Sumerian records. Adamus and other channelings discuss it as well. If you see all of these records and sources, there is a huge connection between the stories. Now, this story spans back hundreds of thousands of years into our past. It talks about Tiamat and Nibiru, the Nephilim, seeding the human race, Adam and Eve, and the children of Lemuria. This portion of the story is really interesting, but not the most crucial to know. We're not going to be covering this at this time. We are, however, going to be picking up the story at the end of Lemuria, and discussing the events of Atlantis up to present day. What I'm going to tell you is a mix of what these records say, along with what Thoth has told us for some finer details. Please have your own experience while watching this. I'm not going to tell you that this is fact. I am simply saying, decide for yourself. There was a time, long ago, when humans existed at a very high level of consciousness. We were interdimensional, and were very psychic. We communicated through thought and emotion, much like how animals do rather than speaking or writing, which would seem very primitive. We lived primarily on a large string of islands called Lemuria, but there was a consciousness shift. We moved up in consciousness, and the islands of Lemuria sank beneath the oceans. At the time of this shift, a new continent rose out of the waters. We called it Atlantis. Back in the early 1900s, the spiritual path of the United States was similar to what's happening today. People began to learn about meditation and study ancient lands like Atlantis and Lemuria. We actually found quite a bit of evidence that Lemuria existed, and it had to do with coral. See, the ocean floor does rise and fall. Coral can exist up to 150 feet under the surface of the water. In 1910, the surface of the ocean was probably higher because they were able to see coral rings heading away from Easter Islands for a great distance. These rings were estimated to be found at 1,800 feet, which means that for them to have existed, they would have had to be much higher and sunk slowly. Probably more important, they also found the exact same fauna and flora from the Hawaiian Islands all the way to the Easter Islands. This is a great distance, but if you look at a map, you'll see a long string. That string, according to Thoth, used to run along the western shores of Lemuria. It is only on these islands that have the same flora and fauna. Same trees, bugs, bacteria, everything. Science can only explain this if there were closer land bridges between these islands at one point. Although we were studying this at that time, World War I began soon after, and we lost interest in spirituality and the ancient lands for a very long time. After the sinking of Lemuria and the rising of Atlantis, at first the human race became scattered. We moved to various islands and continents all over the world because we didn't have a home. Yet, we didn't know where to go. At that time, there were about 1,000 humans at a very high consciousness, more than all of the rest. They were called the Nacals. Today, we know them as Ascended Masters. The Nacals began preparing Atlantis to be our new home. They projected their energies across the surface of the continent in the form of the Tree of Life, not with 10 circles, but with 12, an extra on top on the island of Udal, and an extra on the bottom in the water. There were 10 components on the mainland, and even though it extended over hundreds of miles on the surface, it was projected to the accuracy of a single atom. We chose to move to Atlantis because of the Kundalini. In humans, the Kundalini is often referred to as the energy serpent that runs up and down your spine. When activated, it provides an immense amount of energy through all of the chakras. The Earth itself also has a Kundalini because the Earth is alive, like an organism, running from the center of the planet to a specific place on the surface. Wherever the Kundalini resides, the people there become the spiritual leaders of the world. The Earth chose Atlantis to be the new energetic center of the planet. After Atlantis, the Kundalini moved to the mountains of Tibet, which is why the Buddhists were the leaders in pure spirituality for the last 13,000 years. It was a very pure place. It moved again within the last 10 years, but that's a story for another time. If you want to read more, check out the book The Serpent of Light by Drunvalo Melchizedek. Suddenly, in a single day, the Nacals breathed life into the Tree of Life on the surface of Atlantis. This created vortexes of energy rotating out of each and every circle. Once the vortexes were established, the children of Lemuria began to be called forth. Millions upon millions of Lemurians who had settled all across the planet began to be pulled toward Atlantis. A great migration began. However, the Lemurian body of consciousness had only reached the age of 12 as a planetary consciousness. Because we were right-brained, we were a female species, like a 12-year-old girl, and some of our centers weren't working yet. They had worked with these energies, but only mastered 8 of the 10. Each migrating Lemurian was attracted to one of these 8 centers on Atlantis, depending on the nature of the individual. There, they settled and began to build cities. That left 2 vortexes with nobody using them.
So you have one migration coming into a place that's already there, that already has people there. They're pulling their vortexes into an area, so you already have an invasion with these Lemurians. Now watch how they spin this shit.
Not a single person. These 2 vortexes were pulling life toward them, and in life, you can't have an empty place. Life will find a way to fill it. Similar to if you were driving along a freeway, following another car, and you drop too far behind, someone will fill the place. That's exactly what happened on Atlantis. Though the Lemurians had only filled 8 of the vortex areas, Mayan records state clearly that there were 10 cities in Atlantis when it fell. You can see these records in the Troano document, which is now located in the British Museum. This
is this play. So we can research these documents, even in the Maya, have records of what's goings on with certain of these areas, right? So, you know what I'm saying? We're getting some babies out here, but look how it connects to what the bro, you know what I'm saying, the brother, Prince Uriel Bey. You know what I mean? We're going to get into that. So, alright. So, clearly, we're talking about, you know, seeds of life. We're talking about all these different things. Clearly, they're coming with an Atlantean, you know what I'm saying, good. Here's the good story of Atlantis, but then they're going to say they were hijacked by something else, and something else did something else to them. But that's what they always do. They make you forget about the original hijack.